All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Cyber Week 2020. We are delighted to be here with all of you. This is going to be a very, very exciting week. We've got so many things lined up: platform demos, presentations, keynotes. We have a social hour on Thursday night. And as luck of the draw would have it, Cyber Week is also concurrent with the American election, which is happening tomorrow, which is a very exciting moment. So maybe by the end of the week, some people will be very depressed and some people will be elated, but we'll have to see what happens. We can discuss the ramifications of all of that. But it's going to be a really, really fun week, and I appreciate you making the time. And I can't think of a better way to kick off the week with our keynote interview between two of my mentors and heroes in the field. I think all of you know Ethan Katsh, the father of online dispute resolution, the creator of the field, the founder of ODR Cyber Week. He started the first one years ago, 1998, I think was the first one. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ethan. And the tradition has continued ever since. The National Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution is the host of Cyber Week. I see Noam is on here too. Noam, thank you for all your great work in helping with the organization. The third leg of our stool has been Leah Wing, who's just been absolutely invaluable. So I think I'm eager to hand it to Ethan so that he can make a few comments before we kick things off. But some of you might not know as well the name of a similar pioneer in online dispute resolution and dispute resolution more generally, Jim Melamed, who has got his really on-brand Mediate hat on and ready to go from his lovely house in Sun River, Oregon. Jim has been in the dispute resolution field for decades. He was the co-founder and has been the CEO of Mediate all the way along. Mediate is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. And Jim was the guy who gave me my first opportunity in technology and dispute resolution when he hired me as general manager of Mediate.com back in 1999, alongside his good friend and collaborator, John Healy. So I literally would not have my job today if not for these two gentlemen, because they opened all the doors to me. And I also want to thank Jim because we were supposed to do a book together on online dispute resolution back in 2000. And we were all, Michael Lang was sort of the editor, and he brought Jim and me and John Healy and a bunch of people in to write this book. And he said, okay, well, let's have a first draft ready by January 1. So January 1 rolled around and none of us had done anything. None of us had written a single word. And Michael said, forget it. Okay, I'm scrapping the project. I'm shutting it down. And I said, well, actually, Michael, if you don't mind, I kind of would like to write this book. Can I take the project over? He said, sure, here's the name of my editor. So Jim, thank you for your laziness, because it was because of that I got to write my first book in the field. So with that, I said I was just going to be a host. I'm going to hand it over to Ethan and Jim. So why don't I start out, Ethan, with you? Do you have any remarks you'd like to deliver to kick us off for this week?
I sort of had an expectation, Colin, that you would talk for about 25 minutes.
I easily could go on with stories about the two of you, but I'm holding myself back. So.
Yes. No, I'd just like to welcome everyone who's here. This is, Colin said, our 22nd Cyber Week. I still find that hard to believe, both in terms of the number of years that have passed, but also that we were able to do what we did back in 1998. And Colin, at some point, I remember you put up a webpage from the 1998.
I'll put it in the chat. Yep.
So I hope that's still up. It's a historical document and shows basically we're able to have conversations online. And I think most of Cyber Week was conversations online for 5 years or 10 years. Then there were some demonstrations and software demonstrations for a number of years. And I don't think we had some video, but not the degree of video that we have now. And if this conversation were taking place 10 years ago, it would have lasted all week. 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. But we're now doing it synchronously, and let's hope it works. So Jim, welcome. I think I'd be surprised if there are any people here who are not familiar with Mediate.com, but Why don't you tell us a little bit about the current work you're doing, and maybe even a little about the future work you're doing, and then we can go back 25 years.
Well, let me thank you, Ethan, and Colin also. And as Colin mentioned, he was actually Mediate's first employee over 20 years ago. And then we just sent him off on a sojourn, a journey to get educated. So he opened up his own business, Online Resolution. He went to eBay, PayPal, opened up Modria, sold Modria to Tyler. And after 20 years, he's finally come back home. And not only because of just his expertise and intelligence, but especially just for the prince of a person that he is and his integrity and his leadership. I just personally could not be happier to give the baton to Colin, and just to kind of confirm and make official the coronation. Colin, I want to give you the official director's hat.
Oh my gosh.
And you're in charge, man. Go for it, okay?
Wow. Oh my gosh. Wow. Thanks, Jim. That's amazing. That's fantastic. Heavy is the head that wears the crown.
Sorry, it's a little sweaty, but
I'll loosen it up. I think I have a little more hair to fill it out with.
yeah. So why don't we should honor Ethan by coming back to his question, I think. And I thought we were going to start in the distant past, and so I kind of had that in my head, but I appreciate being challenged. And so what's Mediate doing now? Well, one thing that I think is critical to appreciate about Mediate is that we've been publishing content for 25 plus years. In fact, I just went and looked at the numbers: 13,340 articles, 8,475 news items about mediation, over 700 videos. And the one I'm most proud of is 2,365 authors. And so I think hopefully people see that Mediate has long been an outlet for people being able to publish with really minimum friction and hopefully maximum support, and just to get the information out there. We don't publish everything, but we publish a lot because we believe, information and ideas want to be free. And the reason this is relevant is because the content is what has generated the traffic. After being a reliable, trusted consolidator of valuable information for 25 plus years, we have traffic that is only near matched by the AAA. And, the AAA has a budget that's about 100 times the size, and a staff, that probably is also. So we've done this and in fact have a lot of the legacy information for our field and its roots. And one of the things I'm most proud of also is the video interviews with lots of historic leaders in the field, a number of which have now passed. So that is one thing that is continuing to go on. And in fact, Colin, of late, you've really been expanding that content commitment to arbitrate.com. And we're really trying to do a comparably quality job there. Then to just slightly back up and to give you the quickest overview, ConflictNet and John Healy, and we'll go back to that. That was really the pre-internet textual communications, email, bulletin boards, attachments that really helped get the field going. A decision that ConflictNet and IGC made at one point was to not develop websites when the internet went commercial and graphical around 96. They decided to not do that. And we kind of saw that as an opportunity in substantial part because from a mediator's perspective, in terms of getting hired and selected, it's all about transparency and disclosure. And we just kind of knew that mediators Now they didn't have to print brochures anymore. They could, put their information out there and update it and expand it, enhance it on a steady basis. And that we could also leverage the content to help mediators get noticed by having an active directory, which is really the backbone of Mediate, Arbitrate, and a number of other sites that we manage. So Mediate became really an ISP to the mediation field. We took over email addresses and domain registrations and websites, and we always did dynamic websites so that the user was in control. The client was in control of their own information, which I thought was a valuable concept. We were very early with that. It allowed us to keep the cost down also. And a final little comment, bridging the past quickly. What John Healy did was really got the essential infrastructure of the field online, communicating in this dedicated network, 8 years before the commercial internet. When Mediate came along in '96, John, of course, was a co-founder, and we really became an ISP to the mediation and dispute resolution field, and increasingly building infrastructure. Well, the next really big thing that happened was the cloud. And the reason that was so big is previous to that, if you're an ISP, we not only had our technical shop where people would work, but we had a whole separate location right on top of the biggest tube coming down the Willamette Valley in terms of the internet. And at one time we had 17 servers going, and the physical security of this location was one of the issues that would keep me up at night. And not to say all the updates of all the servers, et cetera. So when the cloud really came along with particularly AWS for us, and we were able to move all that, number one, we had always been very reliable, which was always an important challenge. But now with AWS, that is constantly improving. And it allowed us to really go into case management. And so this is something I want to talk about, is that as we move forward, what I've come to understand is we really have 3 main constituencies in terms of programming and developing infrastructure software. One is the end user, the participant, who today is very likely contacting us on their device formerly known as a phone, okay? And somehow all of our systems need to work with that screen real estate. Then you've got your professionals, your mediators, your ombuds, your arbitrators, and they want to most capably manage their personal professional caseload. And it really is unto them, of course, for reasons of confidentiality and privacy, security, et cetera. And they want to have the ability to have all of their own personal professional tools available to them. But then the most challenging is the top level, where you're developing administrative systems that can have hundreds or thousands of mediators and thousands and hundreds of thousands of cases. And it's this level that caseload manager represents for us. It's intriguing. This has now been under development for, I think it's 11 or 12 years, and really in response to the needs of the field or fields. So not just mediation, ombuds, and arbitration as well. And so we have 5 statewide systems as an illustration. In New York State, we've got 22 community mediation centers on the same system with a state center and metadata and the tremendous benefits that brings. We also, remarkably, and this, on my way out of this life, one of the little smiles on my face will be that ICANN itself is a client of us for their ombuds program. The International Monetary Fund has 2 systems with us for both mediation and ombuds. We've got the International Red Cross, and the best one of all, although I haven't gotten my hat yet, is NASA is a client. And so what that tells us is that we're passing the test. Particularly the IMF did all of their, what they call penetration tests and smoke tests, and we passed. And so this is big because particularly with the pandemic and with the only mediation now taking place being online mediation, there is literally a global demand for all levels of this software, user, professional, and administrative. And what we're doing now, and Colin is in the lead. And to be honest with you, the stuff he's working on now is above my pay grade. I just didn't trust myself to have the expertise to make the decisions that we needed to next make. But essentially, we're integrating Caseload Manager and all of its administrative and scalable firepower. Can I mention correct, Colin, and even augmenting those tools? And so what's happening right now is with the pandemic, with this sudden paradigm shift in terms of mediation and online dispute resolution, we're just going all guns in terms of seeking to develop the world's best platform for participants, professionals, and administrators. And what I know is that as soon as we think we're done, we'll start recognizing the opportunities for further improvement, because that's just the nature of the medium that we're working with. So that's the flyby.
Yeah, I was thinking for a few seconds that I wouldn't have to ask any more questions, but
you may not, but we'll give you at least
I have a few. And one is my own observation. The 90s were a time of a lot of entrepreneurial efforts, most of them really were not successful, and some of them not successful, and losing lots and lots of money. I remember in the video, John mentions once that the early days for him, he thought people wanted to use mediation to resolve online disputes, and he didn't want to have anything to do with that. Instead, he wanted to create a community for mediators and dispute resolution professionals. And in the online dispute resolution field, my first recognition was, oh, there are disputes there. That's great for us. So on the other hand, I think, recently, all of that's converging. I mean, you're absolutely right that the pandemic has been I hate to say this, a gift for the ODR field, but it has been. And the big obstacle in the past for the ODR field were frankly, at least in my view, were mediators and arbitrators who, as a generalization, of course, but as a generalization, couldn't understand how you could resolve disputes without being face to face. That obstacle is over, and who knows how much that's going to affect the future. But I think you're in a perfect place for that as well.
Yeah, and one of the challenges for mediation and online mediation is that mediation's everywhere. I mean, it is in the schools and land use and family and business, and of course, for just as an illustration, e-commerce. And that was with eBay, Ethan. That was the first area, I think, that really felt the criticality of being able to deal with disputes, in part as dispute resolution, and in part as customer service, almost, recognizing the long-term value of clients and reputation and the like. I remember when John was getting contacted very early on, it was about flame wars. where on bulletin boards, people would, and the conflict was text. It was, people really dissing each other, but on a scalable way. And I was thinking about today, like, what were the tools that he would have had available to even try to resolve those flame wars, which would be also text, at those days. And I'm sure just about everybody could have typed faster than John. So he quickly made a very wise decision to not get involved in those flame wars. But fast forward 25 years, we now have the facile technologies really to deal with anything. And I say that because there's no option. I mean, it's sometimes people bemoan this online stuff, it's not quite as good as face-to-face and the beautiful office and the elegant waiting room and the hot cup of coffee or tea and warm cookies and a, perfectly strategically developed office, et cetera. But, that's just not available now. And so the issue is we're doing it online or nothing. And I wish as a trainer of mediators, I would have come up with the role play, in the old face-to-face brick and mortar world, where we would process, how would you mediate if you couldn't get together? Because, we just had that mass experience. Now on my online trainings, I think I want to do a role play. How would you mediate if the internet went out? Just to push the limit. So anyhow, it's kind of compared to what. And John and I would call what we have now, particularly the rich media environment, whether it's Zoom or Legaler or Meetup or whatever it might be. The question was always, would we ever have the rich media, audio, video, text that was almost like being there? And that's exactly what Zoom is. What needs also, though, to be recognized, I think, is that there were 25 years or 30 years of incremental accelerating development that kind of took care of the entire front end and the entire back end of a mediation. So, they would find us by Googling us and our website and our directory listings, and they would vet us and they would learn about our services. They get educated about mediation generally. They would contact us. And I want to note that the nature of a contact has now changed because people can so well vet professionals online that if they're contacting you, they're pretty damn attracted to the possibility of working with you. And this is all to everybody's advantage. And there would be the contact, there would be the scheduling, basically everything. And then we would expect to do the heavy lifting face-to-face. But, as soon as they would leave the office, it's email and attachments and links and watch this video and, fill out this form and pay me and sign and satisfaction survey. So really the entire front end and the entire back end, just from kind of a business management administrative perspective, were largely managed. And I'm not saying in a perfect or best practice way, but to some extent, people had a way. And then when suddenly we couldn't meet, there was the understandable reflexive response of saying, well, let's snap Zoom in there, and that'll take care of the heavy lifting. And in fact, it's a pretty damn good surrogate. But we've learned a lot of other things also, even in a short amount of time. One example would be Zoom fatigue. People just don't have 2 or 4 hours of stamina online. We've also learned how nimble it is and easy to schedule and be flexible and accessible and convenient and affordable and all of those things. And so what I think we're working on right now is how can we best integrate kind of pre-meeting them education, and exposure with rich media for a variety of reasons, to develop rapport, give them the experience of being heard, do what we can do. But I'm very convinced that there's a magical relationship between the rich media, where we want to do it to the extent it's working. But when the going really gets tough and sticky, I think we slow down. I mean, it might be slow down to individual caucus discussion. And I really don't like putting people in breakout rooms because they don't like being in them if it's just them, isolated. It feels like a timeout, kind of. But we need to integrate the rich media with asynchronous textual progress. The easy stuff is email, where we summarize and we develop a little agenda and we ask them homework questions and what do you think about, and if they were willing to, things that we recognize that the discussion benefits from by them being able to percolate on it, think about it. You don't get movement, when you're on camera, under the gaze of the other side. That's probably the moment and place and time people are least likely to be flexible and creative. But we can set the table by harvesting all the goodness that is there, and then really wondering with them, giving them a little time, touching base, individual, joint, text, video, etc. And so there's what I call the palette, which is text, image, audio, video, either real time or asynchronous. And the question for us as mediators is, what's our choreography? How do we integrate all of these things to get the best job done? Sometimes I think it's actually more like a director of a drama who's deciding, what does each act kind of look like? But whatever it is, I'll tell you, mediation is now online mediation. Online mediation is now mediation. I would even push it further and say ADR is now ODR and ODR is now ADR. And to think about those things as different really creates, I think, a false dichotomy that is not helpful. Every case is now an online case. And the question is, how do we best use it?
Yeah, some of my colleagues a year, 2 years, 3 years ago would say someday all ADR will be ODR. And we probably reached that point. But I was going to ask you what looking again to the future a little bit, the big topic these days is artificial intelligence. How does that work itself into resolving disputes? I know how it works itself into creating disputes.
I think it's a fascinating issue. It has to do with something that I know Colin's really been emphasizing, which is case diagnosis, on the way in. So here's what I see as number one. At one end of the spectrum, you could have what we might call full AI, where the computer is asked to guess the best solution for the parties. And I would offer in arbitration, if people are if they want robot arbitration, I think that's a viable product, to be honest. But let's put that to the side for the moment and let's talk about mediation. There's such a powerful ethos of self-determination in mediation that I notice that parties' total control over any substantive result is hugely valued. And intriguingly, not only are mediators and parties resistant to having a solution actually imposed on them, they wouldn't be in the mediation space if they wanted that. Intriguingly, courts are not particularly thrilled about full-on AI decision-making because they kind of view it as lessening the authority and the jurisdiction and the discretion of the judge. Now, that doesn't mean they couldn't take it as advisory, as a side comment. And the reality is there is a lot of AI that just makes the decisions these days. As an example would be child support guidelines, where they are applied over 98% of the time. in most states. But in the world of mediation, I think we kind of go midway with AI. I think we ask over the course of time, not necessarily all at once, but what I might call TurboTax questions. Let's first identify what's relevant and what's not relevant, you know? So let's take a complex situation like a divorce. You know, let's ask them if they have kids, you know, or not. If they don't, guess what? We don't need to discuss all those issues. Let's ask them if they own a house or a pension or the like. So let's first of all sort out that which is relevant from that which is not. Let's also perhaps get some information on the situation. How close do they live apart? How close do they think they'll live apart? What's the level of cooperation or hostility? Are they thinking of a relatively balanced sharing or a primary household? Tell us about the marital home. Are you thinking it would be sold or that one would stay? If so, who? And we can ask about 20 questions and then, or more. And again, you don't want to ask them all at once. So there's what I call dosing as kind of a challenge. But we can get oriented. And what I'm excited by are what I would call exemplars, okay? And exemplars would be solutions that have successfully worked for similarly situated others, okay? And so we find out that they're sharing the school year in a primary home and a lesser home, but now they are talking about summer, and there's a concept of a more balanced sharing of the summer, but they can't really figure that out very easily. And so in the old world, a mediator might say, and I would call these normative stories, okay? In the old world, the mediator would say, you know, I've worked with a lot of folks in your situation. Would it be helpful for me to send you 3 or 4 different models of how you could manage the time over the summer, some more flexible, some more prescribed, some defined, some a little bit more communicative? Would you want to see, would that be helpful? All right, I've never had people say no, okay? And in other situations, because it's valuable gossip, you know, how have similarly situated others successfully resolved this issue? And I would do this, you know, there's a rental and how would they manage it? Or one's going to live in the home for 2 years, but then they'll sell, and what might those things be? And the piece I want to offer is people are still people online, psychologically. And in the world of mediation, people will neither make progress nor settle without being able to explain to themselves and similar and supportive others, because everybody's always reporting to somebody, okay? And so a precondition for movement is what I call a face-saving rationale, or some rationale. And it doesn't have to hold a lot of water, but it needs to be there. You never have a situation where you said, you know, well, why are you willing to do this? And had somebody say, well, I don't know. It just doesn't work, okay? So the development of a rationale for being willing to move or agree psychologically is a critical piece. And so this is where like exemplars are so valuable, because you can say, you know, on this issue that you're struggling with, or maybe not even struggling with, but you just want to be as well informed as you possibly can. You know, would you like to see 3 or 4 models of how people structure contributing toward their kids' college? Would that be helpful for you? Okay, well, great. You know, these are things that have worked for others for what they're worth or not. You never would just do one, because that would come off as directive. But in terms of empowering them, so this is the answer to your question. And this is the piece that I'm actually trying to discuss a little bit with Colin now also, is how we can build exemplar models into the infrastructure software, where you kind of first say how relevant, and then you say how attractive, how utilized, how satisfied, and that in fact, you could have the technology say, hey, understanding your situation, you might want to consider these things. And I see that as remarkably valuable AI, just not full on AI.
Yeah, well, I guess my position would be a little different. I mean, with traditional mediation, the goal is everything comes out. You want all the issues, interests, principles, decisions, all of them be on the table. Maybe consider it true transparency. With AI, you generally get none of that. You never know what you have not seen, because we can't know what we don't know. And this is increasingly, the other side of this is that increasingly AI is going to generate disputes. And we're going to need systems for resolving them. So the one thing I tell people is, all this technology is not really going to solve everything. On the contrary, we don't know whether it will solve more than it causes problems of. And our history, I mean, if you want to take a long-term, 25-year history, some of the things we were most optimistic about in the mid-90s have come back to hurt us. I mean, we have social networks that were thought to be social and that turn out to be antisocial networks. But I don't know if there's anything you remember from the 90s that has turned out differently from what you expected.
First of all, I certainly agree with you that there are a number of facets, to being successful in mediation, including the emotional relational piece that I put in its own frame. I don't, for me, this isn't, you have to actually get people situated to be willing to have the substantive discussion. So there's a number of different frames. Another one, though, for example, would be the educational frame, where the online may really help us, and short videos. In fact, let's bring up another people are still people issue, which is, I've always been struck in mediation, do people come to us at their best? I actually find the opposite is more true, that they often come to us at their angry, worst. And so this brings up a really interesting issue relative to education and empowerment, and assisting them with all of our strategic approaches to be better. In fact, to be as good as they can be, and oftentimes leveraging the excellence of others to help them be even better. So that's just I am intrigued by this concept of exemplars, because it has an analog in our face-to-face world, which are these normative stories. And I always notice anytime I say, would you like me to describe roughly just a few different approaches that have worked for others? And they literally start drooling, in the room. And it's because, they have a part of them that wants to resolve this thing. Okay. But a precondition for that part that wants to resolve it, it's not that they need to win. This is another thing I've really learned. I used to think that it was battle, it was war, and the question is who's going to prevail, on the other, and that winning and being victorious was a powerful motivator. I don't think it is. I think it's much more that people are unwilling to lose. They don't want to be a fool. They don't want to be a chump. They want to be smart. They want to be well considered. And they want to be preferably at their better or best rather than at their worst. And so, these are the kind of things that I think that we can focus on is really assisting people to be informed, to be empowered, to be thoughtful, to be at their best. And this means, for me, augmenting the real-time Zoom call. It means building a broader facilitative infrastructure that we already did, because that's how they found us and learned about us and et cetera. So as to, so I think it's a balance in the world of mediation that in fact AI can be really helpful, but that we have bigger fish to fry, including assisting the people to be capable rather than at their angry worst.
Colin, do we have any questions?
No, no questions have come into the chat, but I think we can open up and ask if people want to ask, see if anybody wants to ask a question live.
Sure.
Yeah. Bill asked a question, actually. He said, how does the concept of the long tail apply to mediators? Bill, do you want to unmute and elaborate a little bit on that, or just float it as you wrote it?
Well, I was thinking about how when the internet first came alive, we were able to find very niche things that we were interested in that used to be hard to acquire. But now, as I'm watching ODR move into courts and other places, it's like it's being centralized and institutionalized and commercialized. And so I'm just wondering, is the long tail phenomenon relevant to ODR as in terms of who provides the service, and where are we at with that?
And I want to understand more about why you have me thinking about liability insurance.
Actually, to build on what Bill said, because this is a question I've asked myself as well. I think the concept of the long tail is if you have like a bell curve, and the vast majority of the cases are in the bulk of the center where the big bubble goes. But if it stretches out, that tail can go really far. And there are some niche applications of online dispute resolution that aren't majority applications. We talk about e-commerce, we talk about court, but there's also some smaller areas where in the past, if you had to get 1,000 cases a year or 10,000 cases a year in order to justify the investment, well, you would just rule those out because we don't need to think about that. But actually, now that the internet can enable us to maybe deliver services in some of those contexts where it's more niche, it's part of the long tail of the bell curve. So I don't know, Bill, if I got that right or got that wrong.
I mean, my wonderment is, that there, again, mediation's everywhere, and there are different practices and cultures in terms of how people access mediation, particularly whether or not they feel compelled to file a due process filing with a court or an agency. And, I've never thought it made too much sense to have the primary result of filing a due process complaint that you get referred to ADR, or mediation, or why wouldn't you just go directly there? But the courts do offer unique services. They offer the ability to throw a glass of ice water in the other's face to get their attention, if you will. And then in certain areas, of course, they're just necessarily legal events. A divorce is a necessarily legal event. If we feel like we actually need to evict someone, there's a way you need to do that. But with some exceptions, I'm going to imagine that the efficiencies of the marketplace will start providing more direct online services, in substantial part, like in the case of mediation. It doesn't preclude any other possibility. If you're not successful, then you still have all of those due process options. In the case of arbitration, it would be different. But my imagination is that we're going to become ever more savvy about promoting these services, and it's going to be to niche markets. Colin, we're doing some work right now, with landlord-tenant evictions in the context of COVID. And kind of trying to rise to that occasion. But it's one of the things that dawned on me, and this is after like 35 years of trying to promote mediation and ADR, is when people are hiring a mediator, I've actually, the best metaphor for me is like they're hiring a dentist. You know, who exactly do they want to put their hands in their mouth, you know, or get involved in their life in this nasty dispute? And if you're hiring a dentist or you're hiring a mediator to help you in one of your most difficult situations ever, you're really not looking for Bozo the clown. You know, you're not looking for the comical. You're not looking for the first timer. You are looking for somebody who's got a great reputation, who's credible, who's expert, who you can trust. And what the point I want to make here is that really limits the nature of individual mediator, individual dispute resolution professional marketing. I mean, you kind of need to market yourself in this pretty narrow window of credibility and, you know, reputation, professionality. But as I've been thinking about it, like for mediate.com and for state associations and national and international associations, the reality is we're selling the best products in sliced bread. And I say that because what are the options? You know, the options are either perpetuating the frustration with a lack of resolution and pulling your hair out, well done here, or it's war, it's battle, it's taking them to court, it's the, all right. And so what mediation offers at the highest level for me is a respectful dialogue and the attempted optimization of arrangements. That's what we do. We try to get each party as much as possible of what they want, that they can at least consider that and compare what is available in the mediation to lack of resolution or war. Now, to market that, you know, to market respect and optimization versus perpetuating frustration or war, that's a challenge that we can do, but we need to do it with like humor. We need to say, yeah, sure, don't mediate. Go ahead and leave it on, you know, or yeah, don't mediate. Go ahead, go to court, see how, you know, and it's that kind of an angle, including like viral humorous videos, that we could really turn the corner in terms of promoting the essence of mediation. Again, respect and optimization. And I really feel passionate about this because mediation is not just a service that we offer professionally. We're kind of a small profession. It's also a model for how people think about, a model and a metaphor, if you will, for how people approach all conflict. And if we can get out concepts of respect and optimization, in addition to our own services, we will have really done what needs to be done at the global level. So I'm now getting behind like apparel, you know, wearables with, you know, mediation is my superpower. And I'm getting behind wall art. I want to be the Wayfair, if you know what, or the Wayfair of wall art, you know, for mediation and collaboration, because we need to change our culture. We absolutely need to, and we have a role, but our role here is not just with our discrete professional services. It's changing the mindset of not, and this is a global phenomenon now. So that's where I'm going. I'm going to apparel and wall art because I want to start changing the context and the culture within which people start thinking about mediation and in our other valuable services.
Yeah, I think we have certainly at least one more question, Colin. I saw in the chat.
Jerome asked, is online mediation more productive getting to the parties' wants and needs, or would it be more productive being live in person so parties can vent their concerns?
Well, let me take a shot at that. I mean, the thing we haven't mentioned today that is a priority or an issue or concern is the phrase access to justice. And whether or not online dispute resolution is more or less likely to contribute to access to justice than not. Jim's metaphor of the dentist is interesting, but I'm not sure it's perfectly placed. Telehealth has taken, doctors and health systems are facing many of the same questions that people in the dispute resolution field or the legal field or the court field, namely, what can technology do better than the human mind? And I'm not sure. The dentist metaphor is valid, I think, up to a point, but also we're looking to displace, not really replace, but displace physicians when they're doing things that are simple. I got an email the other day. I had been to a dermatologist to look at something, and dermatologist looked at it online. I sent her some pictures. She looked at it. She said it was nothing. That kind of practice is perfect. Dentist, a different story. But radiologists, AI is taking over the radiology field and seeing capabilities for seeing things that normally doctors can't see. So, I say that perspective of seeing things that we couldn't see before, but can see now is really the way I look at it.
I think I might do a poll on whether it's dentist or dermatologist or maybe proctologist, who knows who it should be, but it's a trusted profession. You want somebody who you really want to help you, and it's a very conservative decision, was my essential point. I would make an observation that, even in our old brick and mortar face-to-face world, there often was one or more people in the room who really were not that thrilled to be in the room with the others. It wasn't a positive. If they would have been able to resolve things without being physically in the same room. And of course, one extension of this are all the issues about domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and the like. And so the ability to deal with people is just a little bit different. I mean, I'm an old NLP guy, neuro-linguistic programming. I used to, notice everything that changes in their facial color and little micro facial twitches and how are they sitting and are they following and all these things. And you don't have that same acuity. And there's kind of a gestalt feeling, of the situation that is missing. On the other hand, sometimes I'm mediating online and I'll pin one individual's video, and it's not even the one I'm talking to. I'm talking to the other, but this is the one whose nonverbal response I want to be able to track. And so, it's different. It is very different. I'm finding that, number one, online, you're a click away from disengagement, right? So it's a little bit, when you're in the room with people, you notice when they're thinking of like leaving, they gather their papers and they start looking at the doorknob and where's their coat and things like that. And we don't necessarily have that same commitment. They've also taken off work, they've driven across town, they've parked, they've waited, they probably paid for the time already. And so one of the things I know is that you don't want to take a whole lot of risk with your rapport relationship with each participant online. And for that reason, I have in fact found that I'm doing a bit more individual caucusing. And a part of it is just, it's so damn easy. I'll say, hey, why don't I caucus with you for 10 minutes here? And I'll text the other when I want to do an online caucus with them. So they don't even need to wait around for that time. And so I'm finding it's different. it's meaningfully different. We're in a very fine-tuned strategic way tailoring the modalities of communication to the task that we kind of think strategically needs to get done at a particular time. And one other thing for me, I'm starting desirably to hear people talk not so much about access to justice, but access to resolution. And because even in situations where people are in the old world filing with the courts, remarkably, like 95 to 97% of those cases settle. Now, half of them settle on the courthouse steps, and they all go through emotional difficulty, frustration, and high cost, and typically are settling on barely sufficient solutions, that are slightly better than World War III, rather than respectful, optimized solutions. But I'm willing to go into the marketplace. I think that our future, we made a mistake. Well, I'm not going to say we made a mistake, but way back when, the whole thing was, would this mediation stuff be credible and respected by the courts and the attorneys? And it was almost unconsciously within this kind of legalistic framework. Also, we kind of unconsciously adopted what I call a hearings mentality, getting together for a couple of hours, often in a law firm conference room or the like. And I just think, everything has changed. The old paradigm has been blown apart. Now, our office isn't the old place that we loved and cherished as half artist studio, half laboratory. Our office is now a combination of our website and our Zoom background. It's as simple as that. And so it is a total different world. We need to rethink it. One of the things I love about it is the ability to gather data, that we can come up with hypotheses about what might be beneficial best practice strategies, and actually do get comparative data on what actually works. So that's kind of exciting. The other thing that is most exciting to me is that you're not really stuck just mediating where you are. You can now go back to any former place you used to mediate. So for about 30 years, I mediated in our yurt there. And I said, hell, if we're online, maybe I'll mediate from the yurt again. And so I'm just blown away by the possibilities. I'm looking forward to Zoom allowing us to have individually tailored backgrounds for different participants. So the one who loves to garden, we could give beautiful gardens. The one who likes to play golf can see some golf course backgrounds, and that we can also, for example, use backgrounds to give them suggestions about what discussion we're having right now. We can put a word, 2 or 3 of text up in the corner as a reminder, or maybe even have a little agenda embedded or the like. So we are just getting started with this. I couldn't have imagined a bigger paradigm shift. And this will close out and go back to the very beginning. When I met John Healy, it was in Montreal in 1988 at the NCPCR conference, North American Conference on Peacemaking and Conflict Resolution. And he had a big, green monochrome monitor and like a 400 baud modem. And he was showing me email and bulletin boards and attachments. And what I was struggling with then, and I'll build on the laziness here that Colin alluded to. What motivated John initially was he was just getting started with Berkeley dispute resolution, and community boards in San Francisco had a bunch of valuable files, and he wanted to get them without having to drive across the Bay Bridge. So we say it was his laziness and his vision, that motivated him. For me, I had a stack of pink slips because I had been recently hired as the executive director of the Academy of Family Mediators. And I was literally being driven nuts by trying to return all these calls, and they would never be there. And the reality is we needed group calls, and, you tell one person and they forget, or this other one, and it was literally driving me nuts. And so John showed me this thing, and he said, and I showed me email, bulletin board, attachments. I said, so you're telling me we could have one protocol that they would each check their email and the bulletin board once a day. And that with that, I could communicate with them individually. I could communicate in groups. I could communicate in all. I could send files. We would have a bulletin board archive that late joiners could get up to speed. And I could do all of this without the phone ringing and without having to call people back. And overnight, my phone stopped ringing. Overnight. And I just mentioned that because it was a somewhat similar paradigm shift to how technology just changed the whole game overnight. And that's what I think we have going on right now.
Well, Colin, I think you said an hour, so we are a little over, but not much.
I think that's right. And there's great questions that are rolling in the chat, but I think we're going to have to put a pause on those and take them into the discussion forums because we do want to respect our calendar. But so why don't I leave it? Ethan and Jim, do you have any final comments you want to make before we wrap it?
No, I think Jim's right. Everything is touched differently, some positive, some negative. One thing I've noticed personally is that if I'm giving a presentation or a lecture to some group, I don't have the same kind of feedback I used to have by seeing people, seeing their reactions at the same time I'm speaking. So with Zoom, it's 1 on 0. It's the speaker, and speaker gets no help, positive or negative, really, from the audience. But I hope all of you in the audience, I'm intrigued that we had over 30 people. I hope you found this worthwhile.
Jim, any last thoughts?
Well, the big question is, what will the situation be when this pandemic someday passes? And just from a business perspective, I'm figuring that at least half, and most likely more, of future mediation will be online. And it just, the efficiencies, the affordability, the access, we've now been forced to go through this mass training event, both professionals and the marketplace. And, I just don't think mediation will ever be the same, and that's good because it will, even if we can't offer the Rolls Royce in-person mediation in all circumstances, some mediation is better than no mediation. And our ability to offer accessibility, affordability, convenience. Colin, I was blown away by your Clark County experience with Modria, where people working on an asynchronous environment toward their agreement, tell me if I got this wrong, 85% chose to work after work hours or on the weekends. Okay,
that's right.
So that tells us something. The other thing I noticed in a couple of circumstances, one is called completecase.com, another is LegalZoom, but all the people that pay money to get their divorce agreements, so they're actually paying $199 or $299, only 20% are successful actually filling those documents out fully, because as soon as they have disagreement, they can't keep moving forward. And what this speaks to me is we need to meet people just like eBay, okay, in the original model. We need to meet folks where they are when they're having difficulty. And so that would be a next discussion, but we can't just have it be this exclusive forum of mediation. We need to identify the people that are having difficulty and say, would it be helpful to have a mediator at this time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Jeff says, as Jeff made the point, we need to make mediation as accessible as McDonald's. So I think that's a great place to leave it. I will say there's a lot of questions about AI, and I urge you to tune into some of the other sessions we have coming up over Cyber Week. We've got Andy Lee talking about AI. We've got Richard Suskind on Wednesday morning also talking about AI. But please join me in thanking Ethan and Jim for giving us a great keynote and setting a great frame for the conversations for the rest of the week. If you could unmute your mic and give them a round of applause a little bit, that would be wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank you
Jim.
very much.
Thanks, Ethan.
Very nice.
Thanks, all.
Thanks so much. It was a great session.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you.
everyone. The recording will be posted soon, and please join us for the rest of Cyber Week. So thank you so much, Jim and Ethan. Take care, be well, and we'll see you on future sessions.
Thank you, everybody.